Heat shimmered off the blacktop of Route 214 as a battered pickup truck rolled south, an old two-horse trailer rattling gently behind it. Dust curled up from the shoulder and hung in the still afternoon air like smoke that refused to clear. Behind the wheel sat a woman in a faded denim jacket, sun-bleached hair pulled back in a loose ponytail, a chipped thermos of coffee sweating in the cup holder beside a dog-eared road atlas. To anyone glancing over, she was just another drifter passing through, a ranch hand maybe, headed towards seasonal work. Nothing about her should have caught a second look, except for her eyes. They were too calm, too still, the eyes of someone who already knew exactly how the next hour was going to go. Her driver's license said Dana Willoughby. Her real name was Alice Corbin, Special Agent, State Bureau of Public Integrity. 3 years, 2 transfers, and 1 broken engagement into an investigation that had finally reached its breaking point. Ravenwood County, population 11,000. A sleepy stretch of farmland and pine ridges that, on paper, looked like nowhere. In practice, it was a machine, a well-oiled, badge-wearing machine that had been quietly strip mining its own highway for cash for the better part of a decade. "Overwatch, radio check," Alice said under her breath, her lips barely moving. "Reading you 5 by 5, came the low voice of Agent Marcus Ryan, crackling softly through the earpiece buried beneath her hair. Marcus was 3 miles back, parked in a converted livestock hauler disguised as a feed delivery truck, tucked behind the collapsed shell of what used to be the Ravenwood Drive-In. "Cameras are up. Audio's clean on all channels. You are entering the kill box, Sector 4. Deputy Kowalski's cruiser was spotted near mile marker 16 about 12 minutes ago." "Copy that," Alice murmured. "Holding at 55. Let's see if he takes the bait." She adjusted her grip on the wheel, forcing her shoulders to stay loose, her breathing steady. In the trailer behind her, hidden behind a false wall built to pass even a canine sniff test, sat 2 things. $15,000 in marked, fully documented state currency, and a very real, very alive quarter horse named Colonel, whose presence would make the whole rig bulletproof to casual suspicion. If this was going to work, it had to look completely, boringly legitimate, right up until the moment it wasn't. For 11 months, complaints about Ravenwood County had been piling up on desks in the state capitol faster than anyone could quietly bury them. Out-of-state drivers pulled over for phantom violations, cash and vehicles seized under vague suspicion of trafficking. No charges filed, no receipts given, no way to get any of it back short of hiring a lawyer who cost more than what had been stolen. Black and Hispanic motorists made up a wildly disproportionate share of the stops. And at the center of it all, wearing the county's star like a crown, was Sheriff Wade Callahan. Callahan wasn't the one who'd actually pulled her over yet. That would come later, once the trap was fully sprung. Today's job belonged to his most loyal attack dog, Deputy Ray Kowalski, a broad-shouldered man in his early 40s, with a buzz cut and a habit of chewing toothpicks down to splinters. Kowalski had a nose for out-of-state plates and lone female drivers, and an even better nose for cash. He was waiting exactly where the tip said he'd be, tucked behind a faded billboard advertising a diner that had closed 6 years earlier, engine idling, radar gun resting on the dash. 2 miles later, Alice caught the glint of his cruiser's grill in her side mirror. "Target acquired," she whispered. "We've got him too," Marcus said. "Hold your speed. Don't give him a real reason." She held it, dead steady at 55 in a 55 zone, hands at 10 and 2, eyes forward. For a long, breathless stretch of highway, nothing happened. Then the cruiser's nose dipped as it surged out from behind the billboard, kicking up a cloud of red dust, and closed the gap behind her with the deliberate, practiced menace of a predator that had done this 100 times before. He rode her bumper for almost a full minute, a classic intimidation tactic meant to rattle a driver into some small mistake that could be spun into probable cause. Alice didn't flinch. She kept the truck rock steady, refusing to give him anything. Finally, the lights came on. Red and blue strobes flooded her cab, and the wail of the siren cut through the quiet like a blade. "Showtime," she said softly. "We're rolling," Marcus answered. "Stay sharp." She eased the truck and trailer onto the gravel shoulder, put it in park, and rolled down all 4 windows. Standard procedure to keep every camera's audio clean, before folding her hands neatly on top of the steering wheel where they could be seen. In an instant, Special Agent Alice Corbin folded herself away, and Dana Willoughby, nervous ranch hand, took her place. In the side mirror, she watched Deputy Kowalski climb out of his cruiser. He didn't come straight to her window. He walked the long way around, first to the trailer, running a flashlight beam along its length in broad daylight, rapping his knuckles against the side panels like he was searching for a hollow spot in a wall. He lingered there a long moment, staring at the horse trailer with the particular intensity of a man convinced he already knew what he was going to find. Only then did he saunter up to her window, resting one forearm on the roof of the truck, close enough that she could smell stale coffee and spearmint gum. "License, registration, insurance," he said, without so much as a hello. "Of course, officer. Is something wrong?" Alice asked, letting just the right amount of tremor creep into her voice. "Deputy," he corrected, the word dripping with irritation. "And yeah, your rear trailer axle's riding loose. That's a road hazard. I could have been rear-ended trying to get around you." The axle, as Marcus would later confirm from 4 separate camera angles, was in flawless mechanical condition. One more entry on a growing list of fabricated justifications the task force had already cataloged from 13 prior victims willing to go on record. I wasn't aware. I'm sorry," Alice said, reaching slowly and visibly for the glove box, producing a flawlessly forged license and registration under the Willoughby alias. Kowalski snatched the documents without looking at them, his eyes instead crawling over the truck's interior, then drifting toward the trailer. "What's the horse for?" "I'm heading to a job, ranch hand position, over at the Hartwell place." "That's so." He tapped the papers against his palm. "Funny thing about you ranch hands. Always got out-of-state plates. Always driving alone. Always got something hidden that smells a whole lot like trouble." "I really don't have anything to hide, Deputy." "Then you won't mind if I take a look in that trailer." I don't consent to a search," Alice said, and here, carefully, deliberately, she let her voice steady out just slightly, enough to plant the legal marker that would matter enormously 8 months later, without breaking character entirely. "First violation," Marcus murmured in her ear. "No reasonable suspicion on record, just a phantom axle complaint. Keep going." Kowalski's easy, mocking smile thinned into something colder. "You don't consent," he repeated, savoring the words like they personally offended him. "You know, I get a lot of you people coming through here thinking you know the law better than the man wearing the badge." "I only know what I've read, sir." "Step out of the vehicle." "Am I being detained?" "You're being told to get out of the truck before I pull you out myself." His hand dropped, casual and deliberate, to rest on the grip of his sidearm. Alice complied, stepping down onto the gravel shoulder, the heat of the asphalt radiating up through her boots. Kowalski directed her to the back of the trailer, keyed his shoulder radio, and called in a routine traffic stop, requesting backup. A second deputy, a man named Cole Bennett, who would arrive a few minutes later, looking distinctly uneasy about the whole thing, in the exact way rookies always did, right before they learned to stop asking questions. "Arms up," Kowalski ordered. "Terry frisk. For my safety. He patted her down with hands that lingered a beat too long at her waist, her hips. One more small, ugly violation quietly recorded for the eventual case file. Then he turned his attention to the trailer. Anything illegal in there? Drugs? Cash? Anything I should know about? No, sir. Just my horse and my gear. You wouldn't lie to a police officer, would you? No, sir. Well, he grinned, the toothpick shifting from one side of his mouth to the other. I smell something coming off that trailer that says otherwise. That's probable cause. Don't need your permission. He wrenched the trailer door open. Colonel, a broad-chested bay quarter horse, who had absolutely no idea he was playing a starring role in a federal sting operation, snorted and stamped, unsettled by the stranger's sudden intrusion. Kowalski ignored the animal entirely, shoving past him toward the rear wall, running his hands along the paneling until his fingers found the seam of the false compartment. He wrenched it open, and there it was, bundled, banded, unmistakable. His whole posture changed. The irritation melted into something closer to hunger. Well, 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 he said, low and delighted. Look what we've got ourselves here. He didn't call for a supervisor. He didn't request an evidence bag. He didn't so much as glance toward his rookie backup, who stood a few yards off looking increasingly nauseated. Deputy Ray Kowalski simply began stuffing bundles of $100 bills directly into the pockets of his uniform jacket, captured in flawless high definition by the tiny lens embedded in the pen clipped neatly to his own breast pocket. A lost item he'd proudly pocketed off the break room table the week before, never once wondering why it had been left there in the first place. This is a civil forfeiture, he announced grandly, as if reciting scripture. Suspected drug proceeds. You want it back? You take it up with the county in civil court. Fair warning. Usually costs more in legal fees than what we take. That money is legal. I have bank withdrawal records, Alice said, letting real anger slip into her voice now, precisely calibrated. You can't just take it. Sweetheart, I just did. You didn't even log it. You didn't call it in. You put it in your own pocket. Kowalski's eyes narrowed behind his sunglasses, and for the first time something like caution flickered across his face. The caution of a man who's said too much and knows it, but has said it too many times before to stop the habit now. You want to keep running your mouth? He said quietly, stepping close. We can talk about resisting arrest instead. He's cooked, Marcus said in her ear, and for the first time all day, there was open delight in his voice. That's felony theft under color of law, on camera, with audio. We could end this right now. Not yet, Alice breathed, so quietly even the wire barely caught it. Let's see how deep he digs. Kowalski wasn't finished. Frustrated that a simple theft hadn't given him grounds for a real arrest, he turned back to the trailer, dug into his own jacket, and produced a small, clear bag of white crystalline powder from an inside pocket. The same jacket that, minutes earlier, had been stuffed full of stolen cash. He wedged it into the wheel well beneath the spare tire mount bolted to the trailer's frame, glancing once over his shoulder to make sure his rookie partner wasn't watching too closely. He wasn't watching closely enough. Hey, Bennett, Kowalski called out, feigning surprise so poorly that even Marcus, 3 miles away, groaned audibly over the comm. Get a look at this. Found it stashed under the spare. Deputy Bennett trotted over, and to his credit, his face did something complicated. A flicker of doubt quickly smothered. You sure that was in there? Course I'm sure. Bagger. Cold steel handcuffs closed around Alice's wrists, biting into skin already sunburned from the long drive. Kowalski hauled her toward his cruiser with a rough hand between her shoulder blades, reciting her rights in the flat, bored cadence of a man who'd done it 100 times to people who'd never actually done anything wrong. You planted that, Alice said, dropping the trembling act entirely, her voice suddenly flat and cold. Kowalski just laughed. Who's a judge gonna believe? Some drifter with fake tags or a sworn deputy? The drive into town took 18 minutes, though it felt considerably longer from the hard plastic bench seat of the cruiser, wrists cuffed behind her back, the reinforced mesh divider smelling faintly of bleach and old sweat. Ravenwood's town square told its own story. Boarded storefronts, a courthouse with peeling paint, and directly across from it, gleaming and new, a sheriff's department parking lot full of surplus military vehicles that a county this size had absolutely no business owning. Inside, the booking area buzzed with the low, comfortable hum of an operation that had done this so many times it no longer bothered hiding it. Deputies leaned against the front counter drinking coffee, laughing about something on someone's phone. When Kowalski walked in with his catch, the room quieted just enough to acknowledge him, not out of alarm, but out of a kind of practiced, complicit respect. "Got a live one," Kowalski announced to no one in particular. 10 grand in unmarked cash and a bag of crystal in the spare tire well. Booker. The booking sergeant, a heavy-set man with a sunburned neck, didn't even look up from his keyboard. "Name?" "Dana Willoughby," Alice said quietly, eyes down, playing the frightened part to the hilt. Nobody asked about the money. When she asked about it herself, loudly, deliberately, making absolutely certain the request landed on every microphone in the room, the booking sergeant's eyes flicked toward Kowalski, and an uncomfortable silence rippled through the room like a held breath. "Ma'am, I don't know what you're talking about," Kowalski said, stepping close, his voice dropping into something low and threatening. "Wasn't any money in that trailer. Just a whole lot of narcotics you're going to want a good lawyer for. You keep mentioning phantom cash, I'll add a resisting charge to your sheet. Put her in 3. They marched her down a cinder-block hallway, lined with holding cells, and shoved her into one, the heavy barred door slamming shut with a clang that echoed down the corridor. Deputy Bennett lingered a moment after Kowalski walked away, his young face pale. "You shouldn't have brought up the money," he muttered. "He doesn't like being called out." "You knew that bag wasn't in there when you walked up," Alice said quietly. Bennett's jaw worked, but no answer came. He turned and hurried away, leaving her alone in the dim, humming quiet of the cell block. She sat on the thin metal bench and let herself, finally, feel the full weight of the operation. Not fear, but a slow-burning, focused fury at how casually, how comfortably corrupt this had all become. Nobody in that booking room had blinked twice. Theft under color of law wasn't an aberration here. It was Tuesday. "We heard everything," Marcus said softly through the earpiece. "That's obstruction and witness intimidation stacked on top of theft and evidence tampering. Sit tight. Tactical's staging 2 blocks out. Give us 15 minutes. The 15 minutes stretched longer than expected because Sheriff Wade Callahan himself wanted a piece of the catch before the day was done. He arrived at her cell in person, a heavy-set man in his late 50s, with silver hair combed back under his hat, and a swagger that suggested 3 decades of never once being told no. He unlocked the cell himself and marched her to a windowless interrogation room at the back of the building. A scarred metal table, 2 folding chairs, and a wall-mounted camera whose red recording light Callahan reached up and unplugged with the casual confidence of a man who'd done exactly that more times than he could count. "There," he said, dragging the second chair around to sit uncomfortably close. "Now it's just us, off the record." "Why turn off the camera?" Alice asked, letting her voice shake. "Because I'm a generous man, and I like giving people options," Callahan said, folding his hands on the table. "Right now you're looking at a mandatory minimum, 10, 15 years, easy, for trafficking. Your whole life, gone." "I didn't do anything." "I know," Callahan said, and something in his tone shifted, almost gentle, almost bored. "I know exactly what you are. Some rich girl who wandered into the wrong county. But the evidence is logged, my deputies will testify, and none of that matters right now, because I'm willing to make it disappear." "How?" "You sign that truck and trailer over to the department. Civil forfeiture, nice and clean. You sign a confession to a misdemeanor. Paraphernalia, nothing serious. Pay a $500 fine. Walk out today. And my $10,000? Callahan actually laughed. Consider that tuition. You don't mention it again, you hand over the truck, you go back to your fancy life. Or you fight me, and I promise you'll spend the next decade regretting it. It was, in a single unbroken recording, extortion, coercion, and an open admission of a fabricated case, captured in flawless audio by the wire hidden in Alice's collar. She let out a slow breath. And then, deliberately, she let Dana Willoughby disappear. "No deal," she said, and her voice dropped into something cold and absolutely unshakable. Callahan blinked, caught entirely off guard. "Excuse me? You don't have anything, Wade, except about 30 years once the federal charges land." His hand twitched toward his radio, some animal instinct finally catching up to what his ego had refused to see. And that was the exact moment the precinct's front doors came off their hinges. Boots pounded down the hallway outside. Voices barked commands over each other. "State police, hands where we can see them. Nobody moves." And Callahan's face drained of every ounce of its color as the interrogation room door was kicked open, framed by 4 tactical officers with rifles leveled squarely at his chest. Behind them walked Marcus Ryan, a state task force vest strapped over his shoulders, moving past the frozen sheriff without so much as a glance and going straight to Alice, unlocking her cuffs with quick, practiced hands. "You good?" he asked. "Never better," she said, rubbing her wrists as she stood to her full height, reaching into her collar to pull the tiny wire loose and let it hang openly against her jacket. She turned to face Callahan, who was being forced to his knees, hands zip-tied behind his back. "Special Agent Alice Corbin," she said, holding up her real credentials for the first time all day, her voice ringing clear through the small room. "Sheriff Wade Callahan, Deputy Ray Kowalski, you're both under arrest. Theft under color of law, extortion, evidence tampering, obstruction, and enough federal civil rights violations to keep a courtroom busy for a month." "This is entrapment," Callahan spat, twisting uselessly against the zip ties. "It's not entrapment if you happily take the bait," Marcus said, stepping past him toward the hallway, where deputies were already being lined up against the cinder block wall, hands bound, badges stripped, the arrogant swagger drained clean out of every one of them. Among them stood Deputy Bennett, tears streaking down his young face. When Alice passed him, he choked out, "I knew that bag wasn't real. I knew he took the money. I'm sorry. I didn't know what else to do." "You knew," Alice said, not unkindly, but without an ounce of forgiveness in it either. "That's the part that matters. Every person who wore that badge and said nothing made this possible. Silence wasn't survival, Deputy. It was permission." He had no answer for that. He never would. Outside, the parking lot had already filled with news vans, drawn by a tip released the moment the raid began. Beyond the police tape, a crowd had gathered. Dozens of Ravenwood residents, many of them the very people Callahan's department had profiled and robbed over the years. When the sheriff was marched out in handcuffs, blinking hard in the sudden television lights, a heavy silence fell over the crowd for one long breath. Then it broke into something between a cheer and a sob of collective relief. Meanwhile, 3 blocks away, a separate team of agents had already moved on the department's evidence locker. What they found there would end up mattering almost as much as anything caught on Alice's wire. Filing cabinets stuffed with falsified arrest reports, doctored incident logs, and a spreadsheet, kept, absurdly, on an office desktop with no password, tracking monthly seizure totals by deputy, complete with a running tally that made it embarrassingly clear this had never been about drugs at all. It had been a quota system, a bonus structure, a business. 8 months later, the county courthouse gallery was packed shoulder to shoulder for the verdict. Callahan sat at the defense table, looking 30 pounds lighter than the man who'd once strutted through his own booking room like a king. Kowalski sat beside him, staring at the floor, his lawyer having long since stopped bothering to whisper reassurances that weren't true. The trial had been, by any measure, a massacre. Jurors had watched high-definition footage of Kowalski stuffing bundles of cash into his own pockets. They'd watched the overhead camera catch Kowalski planting the drug evidence with his own hands. They'd seen the spreadsheet, projected 12 feet wide on a courtroom screen, every cell a small monument to greed. And that final morning, the prosecution played the interrogation room recording. Callahan's own voice, offering a terrified stranger a deal in exchange for her truck, her silence, and her freedom, echoing through hushed speakers while the jury's faces hardened, one by one, into something close to disgust. It took the jury less than 2 hours to return. On the count of deprivation of rights under color of law, guilty. On the count of extortion under color of official right, guilty. On the count of evidence tampering, guilty. 14 felony counts. 14 guilty verdicts, read one after another into a courtroom gone utterly silent. The judge, a stern man who had spent 3 decades on the federal bench, did not mince words. "A badge is a sacred trust," he told Callahan, his voice rising with each sentence. "It is a promise that you will stand between the public and harm. You weaponized that trust. You built an empire on the theft of the very people you swore to protect. And you did it with a smile on your face." He ordered every asset Callahan had acquired during his tenure, his pension, his bank accounts, a 300-acre ranch bought with laundered forfeiture money, seized and placed into a restitution fund for his victims. Then he sentenced him to 20 years without possibility of parole. Kowalski, convicted separately on the theft and evidence tampering counts, received 12. As the marshals led Callahan from the courtroom, his eyes swept the gallery one last time and landed on Alice. She didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She simply held his gaze, steady and unblinking, until he looked away first. Outside on the courthouse steps, Marcus fell into step beside her. 20 years, he said. For a man his age, that's the whole rest of his life. "He offered me 10, Alice said, pulling her sunglasses on against the afternoon glare. "Guess the exchange rate on corruption runs about double." Behind them, an older woman, one of the earliest victims, pulled over years ago for nothing more than out-of-state plates and the wrong skin color, caught up to squeeze Alice's hand. "Thank you for not giving up on us," she said. "Thank you for testifying," Alice answered. The recordings weren't enough on their own. It took people brave enough to stand up in that courtroom and say what happened to them. That's what actually did this. They walked down the steps together into the bright afternoon light, the rot of one small, ugly kingdom finally cut out by the root, even as both of them understood, without needing to say it aloud, that somewhere else, in some other quiet county, another version of Wade Callahan was almost certainly getting ready to pull someone over for absolutely nothing at all. "So," Marcus said, as they reached the car, "where to next?" Alice pulled a thin manila folder from her bag. The next file, the next county, the next name that had been quietly flagged by a pattern nobody in that particular sheriff's office thought anyone was watching closely enough to notice. "North," she said. "There's a narcotics task force up in the Panhandle that could really use a ranch hand." Colonel, for what it's worth, retired quietly to the very ranch his cover story had always claimed he was headed to, living out the